Hey listeners of the Gaytheist Manifesto, this is Paul from the Chronify Me podcast. Equality. Such a simple yet powerful word. An expression, an expectation, an absolute. For so many of us, yet so inaccessible to so many others. There are dear people in my life, people I treasure, who are subjected to ridicule, bigotry, and harassment on a daily basis because they are gay. It breaks my heart to see them being treated as pariahs in the community because of something beyond their control, something that hurts no one else, something perfectly fine and perfectly normal. I am proud to stand by them as an ally, just as I proudly proclaim my allegiance to the LGBT community in its fight for equality. Thank you.
Coming to you on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I'm your host, Callie Wright, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Daniel Wolfsong.
Hey, everyone.
Jonathan Moore.
Hello.
And today we have two very special guests. Those who heard the last episode will remember my conversation with Kristen, and she has rejoined us today. Thank you so much for coming back, Kristen.
Hello.
And we are joined last but certainly not least by our good friend Seth. Seth, thanks for being here.
Howdy, howdy.
Kristen and Seth are both ex-Mormons, and today we're going to have a talk about Mormonism and the unique experiences Kristen and Seth have, both growing up in the church, leaving the church, dealing with family, and all those sorts of fun things that people in that position go through. So, Kristen, for folks who may not have heard you on the last episode, tell me a little bit about yourself and just a brief, what was it like for you growing up in the Mormon church there?
Oh, that's a big question right there.
And I need you to do it in the next 30 seconds. Go.
My name's Kristen. I'm a transgender atheist, formerly used to be a Mormon. I spent most of my childhood in the church, and when I turned 18, I booked it out of there and never ever returned.
All right. And Seth, my love, let's hear about you.
Well, like Kristen, I was BIC, which is a term that we use for Born in the Covenant. We can talk more about that later. I grew up all my life in the church. My mom was a convert. My father himself was also BIC.
So BIC is the opposite of convert, right? It just means you're born into the family. Okay.
Exactly, yes. And with that, I'm gay. I'm an atheist, obviously. If I was to really categorize myself, I'm an agnostic apatheist.
Okay, fair enough. And so now I just want to open the floor for discussion. Like, I want to hear both of your guys' insights into the Mormon church, growing up Mormon, knowing you were trans or gay, respectively. So just, talk to me about what that whole thing was like.
Well, one big thing, and I think a really good point to start a discussion on is a document that the church came out with around the year 2000, referred to as the Proclamation to the World, a Declaration on the Family. It states, it is its own little Mormon manifesto, to use the phrase, of that God exists, that He has explicit gender roles, that men are providers, and blah 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 blah. It enshrines and encapsulates a patriarchal idea of what it means to be a man, a woman, and it serves as a lot of the framework for my own growing up in the church. Typically, when you turn 8 years old, you formally make a covenant to God to swear and obey Him, because an 8-year-old child can totally make that kind of a decision, right? Mm-hmm. And we refer to that as baptism. This is different from baptism within the Catholic faith or Lutheran faith or even any Protestant sort of religion. No, this is a covenant, and that's a big buzzword, and you hear a lot in the Mormon Church in discussing Mormonism. Now, with that, being gay, I didn't really know about that until I hit puberty, when I started having fairly explicit sex dreams of the wrong sort.
Right.
There's no use sugarcoating it. It's like, there is no way I could mistake exactly what and why I am what I am. But
So Kristen, can you talk a little bit about that? Growing up as a person who, well, I guess first of all, the first question I guess is, at what age did you start to recognize that you were trans? I mean, even if you didn't necessarily know like the word for it or whatever.
I did. Yeah, I didn't have a word for it. It wasn't even really a concept of being in the wrong gender per se, but I knew there was something going on around 6 or 7.
And so given those strict gender roles, I mean, how did you internalize that as a kid? Like, how did that sort of manifest itself?
I saw other people being ostracized for it because they had other members, and one of the members was gay, and they just ripped him a new one every single chance they had. And I learned very quickly, shut my mouth.
Gotcha. Oh. That had to be awful. God.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I mean, were you getting those messages at home too, like as well as in the church, or?
Yeah, my mom was very into the church, and the church itself has very, very strict gender roles, to the point where there's almost exclusionary behaviors, where women are supposed to behave this way, and they're not supposed to behave that way, and same with men. They behave this way, not that way. And so any deviation from that is considered disciplinary action time.
Wow. And that brings down even into the parochial form of the church. You know how you're taught Sunday school. I mean, around the age of 12, prior to that point, it's mixed sex classrooms. You have primary, you go sing for 3 hours, and it was a lot of fun. I owe a lot as far as my ability in singing to that. But at 12, then you diverge into young women's and young men's. Young men's. At 12 years old, you get ordained to be the priesthood. You start out as a deacon, then as a teacher and a priest at the ages of 12, 14, and 16, respectively. And though they bastardize the name of those offices that you would commonly see in Protestant churches, those have very specific meanings in the Mormon Church. With that. You also, from 12 years old onward, you really start to get hit with the heaviest of the Mormon idea of what it is to be male, female, your ideas about sex and gender. If you're a girl, well, don't ever do anything before marriage. Otherwise, you're a licked cupcake, and no one wants a licked cupcake.
Right.
I think that was an actual example used, wasn't it?
By some, I lurk a lot in the ex-Mormon forums on Reddit, and comes up all the time.
PG-13, guys.
Sorry.
That's okay.
All the freaking
we are allowed one F-bomb, right? Sorry, guys.
Well, I can just censor it. It's no big deal. So moving on, past child, and obviously we can come back to that if the conversation goes that way, but so when either of you, if you want to jump in, when you started to sort of move away from the church, because I mean, there are some people who I understand who are gay and trans who try and stay in the church, and obviously neither of you did. So, I mean, what did that process look like, and and how did your families react and that kind of thing?
For me, I started to feel very unwelcome in the church. I saw the church treating other people very badly who weren't members, or who were gay, or who were trans, or they were even treating black people very badly, and it was just awful. And I wanted to get away from that, but it was mandatory that my parents make me go to church every Sunday. And it sort of devolved into an activity that you would want to do, into a punishment that you were being forced to do for some unknown reason. And so the more I was punished into going to church, the more I hated it and resented it. I think my last day in the church, I walked out. I dropped my scriptures on somebody's car hood, I don't know who, and I just kept walking.
How old were you?
I was about, it was a couple of weeks before my 18th birthday.
Okay.
So yeah, well, and because it's just as much pressure for your parents to make sure that you're there as you to make sure that you're there, because obviously if they're not making you go to church, then they're bad parents, right?
Right. And it's like, it was never like a choice. Like, you never felt like you wanted to go, you felt obligated to go.
Like, it was just a thing that you do. It's like you gotta eat dinner at some point, so you gotta go to church too. It's like the same kind of thing.
and talking a little bit more about that, just as far as, you have to go. Mormonism is, and the Mormon culture, you start going for a couple of weeks, you'd really start to notice it's a glass box display. You have to convince other people. You have to show them how happy you are. Once a month there's fast and testimony meeting where everybody who wants to goes up and bears their testimony. I know the church is true. Sniff, sob, tear.
Aww, that's so sweet.
Even as young as 5 years old, these kids go up there. The mom and dad, they go up there, and I know the church is true. I know the church is true.
Yep.
And Thomas wants a prophet. And name of Jesus Christ, amen.
How adorable.
Kind of see how early this indoctrination process starts, and it's just a constant cycle of proving just how righteous you are, how happy you are, how good you are, because the Mormon church says, you follow this church, you follow this religion, then you will be happy.
Right.
Well, it doesn't. I am so much happier than I ever have been ever in the Mormon church. But people need to reinforce that lie. Just keep hypnotizing themselves with it almost. Otherwise, it all falls apart.
Right. It's kind of like a mantra. Like, the more you say it, the more true it becomes, kind of thing.
And there's also a strange adherence to the living prophet, because they have this thing where they have one person who is the direct conduit to God. He directly speaks with Jesus on a daily basis, or so that we've been told.
The presidents,
right?
Whatever.
And so anything he says, anything at all, it's taken as either doctrine or the word or the final word or anything goes. And so,
Or the man behind the curtain.
The question I have is, if the president of the church and the Pope got into a fight, who would win?
the Pope would.
The Pope, because he has so many more people than the Mormons, he just doesn't even stand a chance. I will crush you with my Catholics.
I was going to say the president of the Mormon church doesn't have a glass box mobile, I don't think. Yeah.
Which is kind of ironic, I've always thought.
And his name is Dear Leader.
Really?
Is it seriously?
No.
Oh, God.
I'm kind of
I didn't know if that was a joke at first. I was like, oh my God.
I have.
Like at the risk of sounding mean, like, all of this sounds so nuts to me. Like, it wouldn't be tough. It wouldn't be tough for me to believe that. Like, if you said that's true, I'd be like, wow, that's okay. That's.
I have heard him referred to many times as the Dear Prophet, and I always twist that around to say, oh, he's your dear leader, and they go, yeah, not realizing, Kim Jong-un.
What I find fascinating are some of the more sci-fi elements of Mormonism, like, what is it, Cobol and the
Cobol is Battlestar Galactica.
yeah.
You're not far off.
Yeah. Kolob, that's it, Kolob.
God as you'll ever be.
and like.
Go ahead.
It's just some of it, even mainstream Christians are a little, we were talking about this last week, how mainstream Christians like to laugh, Mormonism, it's so nuts. But then you look at mainstream Christianity, and when you really think about it, it's kind of out
but
too.
not our religion.
Yeah, not our zombie leader.
So if we're going there, and we'll get back to the serious stuff in a minute, I promise, because there's a lot more to cover. But so friend of the show, David Fitzgerald, wrote a book called he's doing a series called The Heretic's Guide to Western Religion, and book 1 is the Mormons. And there are a couple of things in there that he says that I want to know if either of you have heard of or have any thoughts on. So apparently in his research, he found that Mormons actually believe in Bigfoot, and that Bigfoot is Cain.
I've heard that one. I have. It's not a very common thing that I've seen, but you will see it now and then.
That sounds much more apocryphal, especially more dating back to the 19th century Mormonism, when it was first started coming about. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Joseph Smith, and this is...
Let's please do.
Here, John, do you have a can opener? I have this can right here. I just need to get this can of worms open here. Okay.
All I know is I've seen The Work and the Glory, and he is hot.
Well, sorry, he's straight. I think he proved that about 33 times.
Oh, okay.
With 33 different women.
Or he was trying really hard to prove it 33 times.
Sure.
Oh,
Just saying.
Kristen, are we in Carthage? No, are we in Liberty Jail? Shots fired!
They're making all these references.
I know. We have no idea what they're talking about.
They're both on video just cracking up at each other, and we're like, okay.
Liberty Jails where Joseph Smith was shot.
Luckily, I lived in Salt Lake for 7 years, so I sort of understand. So.
You have to go back to the beginning on who Joseph Smith was before all this religious stuff, and he was a con man. He was a huckster. During that time, there was a lot of pseudoscience floating around, snake oil salesmen, things of that nature. And he would do this thing called treasure finding using a magic stone. And what he would do is, I'm totally not even making this up. This is a historical document.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you're in a position of power here because you can say pretty much anything, and I'm going to believe it, honestly.
Me too. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, no, go look it up if you don't believe me. I encourage you.
This is the equivalent of what Joseph Smith did. You see this pillow? See? This is actually a magic seer pillow. Okay? When I put my face into it, then God reveals things to me, and I light from these two stones that I have inside this magic seer pillow revealed to my eyes the translation written on these golden plates that no one has ever seen, that I'm just carrying around. That should weigh about almost 200 pounds that I'm carrying normally and running.
It's a miracle.
Take my money.
So many things,
and don't
hidden
forget
by the mysteries of God.
And don't forget, if someone steals some of your translated pages, God will become angry, give you the same pages but written slightly in different wording, and that's a miracle. Okay,
this needs to be clarified here. Your analogy with the pillow is actually pretty spot on, believe it or not. What had happened was, apparently this Joe Smith guy, he found a bunch of golden tablets out in the middle of the New York woods, and apparently some angel gave it to him and said, hey, translate this. This is your new section of the Bible called the Book of Mormon.
Wait, what about Satan attacking him as a toad?
Uh-huh. As is tradition.
Uh-huh. And the stone that he used to find treasure magic stuff on farmers' fields, he used that same stone to help, quote-unquote, translate these golden plates. How he would do it is he would literally put the stone on the bottom of a top hat, stick his face in the hat, and then he would say that there would be letters glowing on the stone, and he would read them out to a scribe who would then write it down. And I'm not even kidding how goofy this sounds. Literally, stone and hat and face, translations.
So what you're saying is the South Park episode was pretty much spot on.
Yes, the South Park episode is 100% spot on.
Not quite. I mean, it does use names and locations, but yeah, that is completely accurate.
Dum 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 dum.
Yeah.
Smart.
Yeah.
About the smart. The wives of one of the, I forget who the wife was, but she said, "Hey, if Joe Smith really has these tablets,
Martin Harris's wife,
right? Martin Harris. We'll do a little test on him because science is awesome. What we'll do, we'll take some of the pages that he's already translated, hide them, and then ask him to translate them again. If they are the same translation as the first ones, then we know he's telling the truth. If he can't reproduce them, then we know he's lying."
Right.
And he said, "Oh, God commanded me not to reproduce those."
Didn't he?
Because hidden by the wickedness of men, the golden plates have been taken back to heaven, and you've been chastised, and I have suffered the pain of a damned soul for 3 days, only to be... I'm serious.
And that's considered a miracle by the Mormons, right?
It's not considered a miracle so much as a failure of Joseph Smith as a man, because, he's a prophet, but he's still a man.
Right. Okay, so taking this back to Seriousville for a minute.
When you're discussing Mormonism, there is no Seriousville.
Fair enough.
Nothing but us crazy folks here. Us and us apostates.
Only Scientology is weirder. So.
Here's an excerpt from Fear of Physics by Lawrence Krauss.
A physicist, an engineer, and a psychologist are called in as consultants to a dairy farm whose production has been below par. Each is given time to inspect the details of the operation before making a report. The first to be called is the engineer, who states,
"The size of the stalls for the cattle should be decreased. Efficiency could be improved if the cows were more closely packed, with a net allotment of 275 cubic feet per cow. Also, the diameter of the milking tubes should be increased by 4% to allow for a greater average flow rate during the milking periods."
The next to report is the psychologist, who proposes the inside of the barn should be painted green. This is a more mellow color than brown and should help induce greater milk flow. Also, more trees should be planted in the fields to add diversity to the scenery for the cattle during grazing to reduce boredom. Finally, the physicist is called upon. He asks for a blackboard and then draws a circle. He begins.
"Assume the cow is a sphere."
This old joke, if not very funny, does illustrate how, at least metaphorically, physicists picture the world. The set of tools physicists have to describe nature is limited. Most of the modern theories you read about began life as simple models by physicists who didn't know how else to start to solve a problem. These simple little models are usually based on simpler little models, and so on, because the class of things that we do know how to solve exactly can be counted on the fingers of one, maybe two hands. For the most part, physicists follow the same guidelines that have helped keep Hollywood movie producers rich. If it works, exploit it. If it still works, copy it. I like the cow joke because it provides an allegory for thinking simply about the world, and it allows me to jump right into an idea that doesn't get written about too much, but that is essential for the everyday workings of science. Before doing anything else, abstract out all irrelevant details. There are two operatives here, abstract and irrelevant. Getting rid of irrelevant details is the first step in building any model of the world, and we do it subconsciously from the moment we are born. Doing it consciously is another matter. Overcoming the natural desire not to throw out unnecessary information is probably the hardest and most important part of learning physics. In addition, what may be irrelevant in a given situation is not universal, but depends in most cases on what interests you. This leads us to the second operative word, abstraction. Of all the abstract thinking required in physics, probably the most challenging lies in choosing how to approach a problem. The mere description of movement along a straight line, the first major development in modern physics, required enough abstraction that it largely eluded some pretty impressive intellects until Galileo.
Fear of Physics by Lawrence Krauss. Find this audiobook and many more at atheistaudiobooks.com. The facts you won't hear in church.
So, Kristen was good enough on our run sheet to write down notes for possible points of discussion, and I actually appreciated that. So, there's this thing, and most people know this, about how God didn't like black people until 1978, then all of a sudden changed his mind. So my question is when is God going to change his mind about gay and trans people, do you think?
When it becomes politically necessary. I mean, the church was they had threats from the government that they would lose their tax exempt status. That and other penalties if they did not lessen up on their restrictions against black people. There is nothing sacred or God about it. It was all about money and social status.
And the same thing happened when they miraculously outlawed polygamy. It was like the U.S. Army was about to attack Salt Lake City when all of a sudden the prophet had a miraculous revelation that they're supposed to be polygamous.
And I also wanted to bring up, and I watched this documentary last night. It's only 15 minutes long, highly recommended. It's called Trans Mormon, all one word. And it's the story of this trans woman named Ari. I think, is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
And as far as the trans thing goes, I mean, her story is kind of familiar. Growing up, you feel like you don't identify with the body that you're in, and all of that sort of stuff. But she's Mormon, and still a faithful Mormon.
I think, I know what you're talking about. I've actually listened to that before. And
trying to work out her place in the church as a trans woman, and as an atheist, obviously that's really it doesn't make sense to me. But I mean, I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts. Like, is it indoctrination that keeps her wanting to come back, or I mean, what do you guys think is going on there?
Okay, I'll let loose my thoughts on that. I am a cis man, but what I want to talk about, it really has more to do with how you view yourself. Mormonism for me was a schema, and when that schema cracked, it was actually because there was another one that was ready to take its place. I lost my faith when I was around 17 after a year of involvement with a Lutheran student organization on campus. I became good friends with the pastor, started working through some of my repressed sexuality, and then all the history hit, and it's like, oh, Brigham Young said you need to cut your throat open if you have sex with someone outside of marriage to atone for your sins? That's really f***ed up.
Wow.
That's referred to as blood atonement. Oh, Brigham Young actually led a mob and tore out the testicle of a man who slept with a woman that he wanted as his, 56th wife. And he hung that same testicle on his porch. Oh, wow. What a great guy.
Wow.
Yeah, it's savage. It's bloody. It is disgusting, this history. So there was, now, as far as how that built into myself, the church teaches you that you are Mormon first, and then you are you.
Right.
Hanging out with these Lutheran students, it really... I started to develop multiple identities, if that makes any sense at all.
No, yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I started thinking of myself as part of them, and as a college student, and as the 16-year-old kid who's actually going out and doing college this early after a lifetime of homeschooling. It was unbelievable what I managed to pull off. But so really starting to step away from a lifetime of homeschooling, from very sheltered, very mono-identity way of thinking to a much more poly-ish way of thinking.
Well, right? Just understanding that there's more to you than just this one thing.
Exactly. There's so many things that build into it. Now, taking that kind of an analogy into our discussion about Ari, yes, she is a woman, right, her gender identity, and she is a child of God, and she is a Mormon, and this and that. And in her mind, those two things don't conflict. Being trans and Mormon, there's not, because this is who God made me to be. This fits in well with who I am. I was born in the wrong body because nature is a fluke. There are nature's flukes, and I'm just dealing with it the best I can. So if I was to take a stab at how she's thinking and how she's handling that, it's because she does not have this one idea of what it is to be her. And I had that before. Right. Why I couldn't come out.
Right. Kristen, what do you think?
part of the Mormon culture is the shared experiences, because it's not just go to church and you're done for the week. There's church dances, conferences, potlucks, all sorts of social gatherings. It is your life. You of course, you have school, like when you get to attend school, but everything about your life revolves around the church and church functions.
Yep,
so even if you don't believe anymore, you're still very attached to that social function. And this is your world.
This is your society. So you become an ex-Mormon. You make yourself other. You cut yourself out of the fold.
Right.
Yeah, but the food, oh my God. I've had Mormon food.
A Jello.
It will make you so fat. Anyway,
so it's kind of like the more strict sort of evangelical Protestant Christianity in that way, where your entire life is the church kind of thing.
Yes.
And and if you leave the church, I mean, you're literally leaving everything that you knew behind, kind of thing.
Right. I want to ask Kristen, what do you think about calling the church a cult?
I think the upper management, the leaders, are very cult-like, but when you get down to the ward, which is like the subgroup of one church,
right,
it's not so much of a cult if you ignore all this crazy stuff about what you do in the temple and all this other stuff, because you're really dealing with people who seemingly genuinely care about you. And you're laughing and clapping.
I was just thinking about the temple. It's like,
okay.
Have either of you been in the temple? I'm curious.
Yes.
Where I did baptisms for the dead.
Okay, this needs more clarification. So,
thank you for that.
We had grave robbing one night. No.
So
it's a social function.
They're not actually putting dead people into the water with them. What's happening is they're going through archives of finding past relatives and people who have died in the past who weren't Mormon, and then they bring in like us doing temple work, saying you're gonna be a stand-in for so and so who died in the past, right, and their spirit's going to enter your body, and then we're going to baptize you in their name so that they can go to heaven. So what they would do is they would go through the obituaries, they go through the records, and they say this person who died wasn't a Mormon, who didn't get a chance to be a Mormon, and thus doesn't go to heaven. So we go in the temple, we get all of our baptism garments on, we get into the tub, which is actually nice warm water, which I'm thankful for. And we say, I, so-and-so, invoke the spirit of so-and-so into my body so that they may be baptized. And then they do the prayer, and they dunk me in water, and they pull me out, and then now that person who has died has now retroactively been baptized and now can go to heaven.
What cult of Mormonism did you grow up in? That's as I remember it. Really, let's give them some context about the whole pre, present, and post spirit life. Kristen, do you remember?
Please do.
I blanked out for much of that after I left.
Okay, I was 110% Mormon, and the adults in my world are like, "Oh, you're such a scriptorian," because I could pop out 5 scripture verses on the spot.
And they use the word scriptorian for that?
That it was just it was almost a little bit of an honorific. I'd never heard it before, but I know.
Yeah, going back to the sci-fi thing, that sounds like some sort of like Imperial Guard, like.
So
my son is a scriptorian.
So that proxy baptisms, it kind of explains why Mormons are so big into genealogy.
Yes, they are.
Very much so. It's literally, you are responsible for every soul you did not save.
Wow.
I'd like to point out that during Mitt Romney's campaigns to become president, it became aware that the church was baptizing Holocaust victims.
Right, I remember that.
Right. And so they got into a big trouble over it. There was a lot of outrage. One of the Jewish community leaders, he was outraged himself, and he pointed out how wrong the church is. And eventually the church apologized and said, we'll stop doing this. A few months later, they got caught doing it again. And ironically, one of the names that showed up on that list was the Jewish guy who was outraged, who was actually still alive at the time. They didn't realize it.
Oh, God.
Whoa.
Like, we're gonna get you, sucker.
Hitler's been baptized like 5 or 6 times.
So they're like extra going to heaven.
Well, let's give some more context to that.
Let's do. Keep it coming.
Okay, so the Mormon nutshell version. Before we came into this life, God has millions of spirit babies. Mm-hmm. Okay, with many of his immense numbers of wives, and we were all there. Now God came up with the plan. He's like, "Oh, hey, I'm going to make an earth, and like you're all going to get bodies, but some of you are going to get the wrong bodies, and some of you are going to be like you're going to be gay, and just to make it interesting, okay?
Switch it up a little bit,
right?
And with this, you're going to be tested, and if you're gay, you're going to go to hell unless you marry a woman. No.
What about the part that God is an alien from another planet and he used to be human?
We'll touch on that, but that actually ties into it. Okay. Following the logic, you're going to get an infinite recursion of gods.
And the word logic is used in the most loosest sense possible.
I think in this discussion that's probably assumed.
Okay, let's go down the rabbit hole, guys.
Okay. Oh, take us there.
So revisiting this, got a little more of a scholarly bent to it. Again, God, we were all His spirit children, and God came up with a plan. Said, "Hey, everybody, I'm going to create an earth. You're going to go receive bodies, and you have the chance to become like me." Yeah. Now we all, if you're here, if you have a body, that means you're like, "Yay, I'm on your side, God." But Lucifer, back up just a tish. And God said, for this plan to work, I'm going to need a sacrifice. I'm going to need someone to take your sins away because you're going to screw up, you're going to sin, and you can't come back if you're sinful. So Jesus is all like, "Hey, God, choose me, and I'll be that sacrifice according to your plan and your desire." And Lucifer is like, "Hey, God, choose me, and I'll make it so that no one won't fall out of that state of grace, that no one will sin, and everyone will come back." In essence, he would take away our free will and make us, puppets. He'd be a little puppet master. Okay. Now, God chose Jesus. And Lucifer, with 1/3 of the host, 1/3 of an innumerable host of heaven, mathematician rage, or hitman rage.
And don't forget, Lucifer was Jesus' brother.
We are. You are Lucifer's brother, sister.
Yeah, we all are.
Yeah. Guess what? You've got Jesus as a brother,
and Satan,
according to Mormon logic. Anyway, Lucifer's 1/3 of the hosts of heaven. They lost and they were cast out of heaven, and now they are devils. Mm-hmm. So all that raging thought, like Seth, when you were younger, and you said, "Oh my God, that guy is so hot," that was actually Satan whispering in your ear. Because according to Joseph Smith, Satan can control your thoughts if you give him the power to. You can imagine how much that fucked me up as a kid.
Right.
I actually had what I now refer to as religiously induced schizophrenia as a consequence of this 19th century magical thinking that ties in devils into our literally everyday life. It screwed me so much as a kid.
Well, yeah, and going back to that, because as much as it's fun to learn about, Mormon doctrine and all that sort of stuff, I really would like to know, if you guys are comfortable talking. Obviously, I don't want to run up against any, any personal boundaries or anything like that. But how has all of this affected your all's relationships with your family?
I'd like to start by saying that I'm not the only trans person in my family.
Okay.
I have 5 other siblings. I'm the oldest. I'm trans female. I have a brother who used to be my sister, and then my baby sister is a lesbian, and I think there's 2 more gay people on my mother's side, and it just kind of goes back and back and back.
Right.
It's not genetic at all. No.
My oldest sister is actually gay. I'm gay. I'm number 3, and I have 7 siblings. And I'm just waiting for my younger siblings to start popping out of the closet.
So if you guys are cool talking about it, I mean, what's mom and dad's reaction to that?
For my family, we all used to be very devout. I used to be very devout. And then we started to fall away. I fell away. My brother fell away. And I'm going down the line of siblings.
Right.
The next sister, she's still a hardcore believer. She's a BYU student. The next one, who's now my new brother, he fell away. And then my other brother after that, he's still forced to go to church, but he doesn't want to because he thinks it's stupid. Mm-hmm. And then my baby sister, who's a lesbian, she doesn't really have an opinion for and against it. She just sits there and goes, okay.
Myself, it's very much work in progress, but taking a snapshot of this point in time, my oldest sister has left the church with her husband, my gay sister. And
hang on.
Wait, yeah, back up.
Your gay sister has left the church with her husband?
She met him when he was 14. They were 14, and they married.
Gotcha.
She didn't really formally come out until recently. Come out to us about that. I knew prior because coming out to her as gay. When I did that, I let everyone know. Tear that Band-Aid off, and that's what I learned some things that I've kept in confidence for her. Now, with that, where was I going? All right. I've left the church. My oldest sister gone. My second oldest sister, number 2, she's actually getting married to her husband in a week from today in the temple with little throat slitty rituals. I left. My younger brother left as well. He considers himself Baptist now. My younger brother, he's got some, he's autistic, and so I don't really know where he is with regard to the church and all. My younger sister, it looks like she's in the process of leaving. Mm-hmm. And my youngest siblings, I don't know where they are at in terms of faith, but I have a very strong relationship with my siblings. Very strong. Mm-hmm. That my mother as well. My mom's also out. Conversely, my father, I have actually disowned him because he is.
When you say your mom's out, you mean your mom left the church?
She is no longer a believer. She's still formally within the church, just so that she can attend my sister's wedding. At which point she's
gotcha.
Willie.
Okay.
But my father, born in the covenant, he is. He's happy circling the drain because that's all he's ever known. He's comfortable with it.
Gotcha.
And there's a tendency for people who first leave a church to kind of go wild with stuff that they weren't originally allowed to do. Sure. Like pornography, drinking, smoking.
Penis!
Yeah, I mean, and I'm totally not even kidding. Everything that in their lives is regulated to the point where they don't drink or smoke or drink coffee or anything that sort of watch anything above maybe PG-13.
Right.
And so when they get out, they go nuts. And I've seen my brother do this where he's now smoking pot. He drinks a lot. He's still underage, by the way.
Right.
He watches some of the dirtiest movies I've ever seen. And it's like, you just swung that pendulum pretty far to the other direction. Just take it easy. All things in moderation.
Right.
Hey, Kristen, did I bother you with my porn shoulders?
Okay, that needs more explanation.
Going into there's so much happening here on video, on Skype video, that the listeners aren't getting to behold. But
Seth was being a bad boy and baring his shoulders.
He's a bad boy. There's a current trend going on in Mormon culture where women who wear sleeveless anything are considered a bit slutty. It's kind of like the same mentality in like the 1800s, where if you show a little bit of ankle, you're kind of a slut.
I remember that when I lived in Salt Lake, there were places that sold like like dresses for like proms and stuff, and they had the dresses on display, and there was a big sign that says also available with sleeves.
Yes, that is part of the thing.
And it ties into Mormon expectations about body. It ties into gender, but without going into gender, modesty. Your body is a temple. It's the home of the Holy Ghost. Blah blah blah. And Kristen makes a disgusted face.
but guys can wear tank tops and stuff, but not.
Guys can run around in their underwear for all you care. I mean, that's fine. That's modest.
I'm fine with that.
As long as you.
I always thought religious modesty was sort of a weird type of thing, because if you're saying that God created your body and then told you that it's shameful, that doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Well, that goes back to Genesis. They were naked but not ashamed, but then when they sinned, they became shamed.
Kristen is dying to say something.
Okay, so in Mormon culture, and I need to say that I'm not joking, even though you're going to bust out laughing, they have this thing that they don't call it this, but we call it this. It's called magic underwear.
Oh yeah, temple garments. This is something I actually know a little bit about. So yeah, I'm not totally ignorant when it comes to this. So go ahead, tell us all about it.
So initially, it was considered physical armor, like it would protect you physically when you don it, and so you weren't supposed to take it off even when it's hot out. It's your physical armor to protect you, made by God. And so as time goes on,
from what exactly? From sin?
Satan.
Well, it was considered a physical protection, like you'll stop a bullet or something. And so when they found out that's
definitely not true, that exists in Mormon culture, that kind of mythology.
When they found out it's not true, they kind of switched the doctrine a little bit to say, okay, now it's spiritual armor. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and somebody asked Mitt Romney about it, because he was coming to Cincinnati for a campaign event, and I seriously was thinking about going just so I could try and ask him a question if he wears magic underwear or not. But somebody did ask him a question about that, and if I remember right, it was something about his answer was something about it was just supposed to be a reminder of your covenant with God or something like he didn't even bring up the spiritual protection thing. So and then there's probably a range of views on that, because I'm sure Mormonism is a lot like any other, where there's probably not, there are people who disagree with certain points of doctrine, or
you better not.
But he mentioned that yes, it is a reminder of his covenants. At least that's how I was taught. That is correct. Mm-hmm. What no one ever really talks about, and I watched my dad go around in the house in his garments most of my life, so I got a really good look at these things.
So you know exactly what they look like forever.
Yes. On the left nipple, there is a horizontal cut. On the right, there's actually a right angle. On the navel, there's a slit. And on the knee, there's also a slit. That is to remind you of the temple oaths that you took, which are actually changed in the 90s, that you would rather have your bowels cut open, your throat slit, rather than divulge the secrets of the temple. Oh, that, and it's a reminder of your covenants.
Would you like to divulge some secrets of the? Would you like to divulge some secrets?
I think we've been doing that for the last hour now.
So one thing I'd like to ask you guys about. I've heard a woman's place in the future kingdom is to continue to have babies after they're a spirit. Is that true?
They're from pregnant in the kitchen.
Okay, I do have to speak on this because it is a thing. It's not universally in the Mormon Church, but there's a thing called quiverful, and quiver as in the pouch of arrows. What it is it's a movement between mothers who are making as many babies as they possibly can, and those are arrows for the Lord. They are filling their quiver with arrows, is what they're calling it. And so the woman's job is to just produce babies as fast as they can, as much as they can.
And this is why you commonly see kids, use the phrase, very early 20s. Oh, I've known you for 3 months. This is crazy, but here's my finger, so ring me maybe.
Oh my God.
Wow.
It's why you see like a family of like 19 children or something. It's ridiculously large.
Like
Oh my
19
God.
kids and counting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Are they?
I always
Mormon?
did wonder about that. Why Mormons have so many kids?
That is the well. It comes from a tradition where farm hands were necessary, and so the more kids you had, the more farm hand help you had.
Mhm.
It kind of stems from that, but also stems from go forth and multiply. So
Right.
My boyfriend Danny, his parents are Mormon. He used to be Mormon, and his parents couldn't have kids, and it was the worst thing ever. So he's adopted, and his sister's adopted because it was shameful that they from what I understand, this was back in the 70s and 80s. They were actually shamed for being barren, like it was something bad. Yeah, so they adopted.
Yeah, and this seems terrible to me for women who can't have children because they must feel like some sort of failure, and B, women who don't necessarily want to have kids, but there's so much social pressure in the church to have lots of kids that they almost sort of lose their agency in that decision.
Yeah, a friend of mine actually put up on Facebook that, I think I have a picture of it. It really encapsulates a lot of what's expected of you as a woman in the church tremendously well. Give me just a second here. It was so good I actually sent it to my mom.
Nice.
Okay. I think the hardest thing about being a mom is loving the thing that is ruining your life unconditionally.
Right. Yeah, I remember seeing. If you shared that, actually, I think that was where I saw it. If you shared that,
right.
All right. Well, listen. We could probably go for days on this, but we're coming up on about an hour here, and so to wrap up here, what I'm really curious about is how both of your experiences have sort of shaped your life going forward and shaped your worldview. And, is it something, obviously this experience is a part of you, right? And it's going to shape your worldview and your life. Is that something that you feel like you would change if you could? Is it something that you regret that you were born into? Or, have you sort of taken this experience and found the positives, or, just kind of speak on that for a second?
In short, yes. I wish I had not been born Mormon. I wish I hadn't had this whole mind of a religion foisted on me. Mm-hmm. And I wish I had, because part of it too, I was homeschooled for the first 16 years of my life, out in the middle of the country with my siblings. Siblings fight. Nowhere to go. No friends close by. No lessons in socializing except this one time a week thing that you'd go to on Wednesday night activities, and then a 3-hour stint where you go sing the praises of Joseph Smith.
Right.
I was suffocating. To say nothing of being gay.
Right.
I was starved for social something, and if I had different cultural reference, then yes, it would have. It just wouldn't have been as dramatic, I think, for me.
Gotcha.
But the flip side of that is growing up in such a monoculture, breaking that, moving out of that. That taught me to not only to think critically, but also to accept things that don't fit my worldview. And it's served me every single day of my life.
Kristen, what do you got?
I'm not sure if I would change the past. I would certainly have loved to not be born in the church and to get the medical treatment I needed early on instead of late 30s. Mm-hmm. Well, not late 30s, but 31 actually. But
right.
On that note, I do hate being in the church. Because I would have loved to get that medical treatment done in like 18, 17-ish area. But on other parts, I'm kind of grateful I've had the experience because my BS detector is now ultra strong. I can spot it a mile away.
Gotcha.
And part of the Mormon culture is, and Seth might back me up on this, there's a lot of pseudoscience, like supplements, homeopathy. It's very prevalent in the church.
Yeah.
And I
Very
would have
much so.
swallowed that stuff hook, line, and sinker. Have I not escaped and then learned the truth and then come back and see my parents spending thousands of dollars on this stuff?
You are not taught to critically think. You are taught to bow your head and say yes.
Gotcha.
That is what you are taught.
Well, this has been an absolutely amazing discussion, and I want to thank you both for it. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with Be a Better Ally, and we're going to ask Seth and Kristen about how we can be better allies to folks like them. We'll be right back with more Gaytheist Manifesto.
I'm Daniel Radcliffe, and I believe that reaching out for help is the bravest thing a person can do. If you are struggling and need support, call the Trevor Lifeline at 1-866-488-7386. It's free and confidential, and trained counsellors are there to listen 24/7 without judgment. To learn more about the Trevor Project's life-saving work for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or questioning young people, go to thetrevorproject.org.
Welcome back to the show, and we are still here with Seth and Kristen for Be a Better Ally. So what I would like to hear from both of you is, as ex-Mormons, knowing what it's like to have that kind of struggle about, coming out of, what you were taught growing up and what you once sincerely believed, in what ways can we be better allies to folks like you, or folks who are struggling, folks who are, questioning and things like that? So just kind of talk on that for a minute, if you would.
I think the biggest thing you could do is listen, especially if we are only in the very early stages of questioning our faith, because within Mormonism, this is not a faith. This is a world.
Right.
This is a society. This is culture. This is identity. Not only faith, this is your tribe. And suddenly, you're questioning what it means to be even that.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we forget that people's religions are part of their identity, or sometimes their entire identity. And I think as atheists, it's easy for us to forget that, because we can divorce someone's religion from them, and we can say, like, well, I think your religion is silly, but I still love you as a person. Right. And the religious person doesn't think of it that way, because their religion is their identity. Right. And I think it's important to recognize that if we want to have conversations with those people. Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. That's very true, but especially with somebody that's growing up in Mormonism, typically they don't. Well, this is in my experience. That's all I've ever known.
Right.
If you're going to perform brain surgery, you have to do it very delicately and very slowly.
Right. Kristen, what are your thoughts?
I like that brain analogy. It's important to understand that Mormons who are questioning they believe they're living in a different world entirely than what actually is going on, because many of them are still young Earth creationists. They've been taught this their whole lives, and so their view of reality is very, very different than what actually is. And so rather than throwing them into the deep end of the swimming pool, you kind of have to ease them into it a little bit, and not by saying, here's fact 1, here's fact 2, here's fact 3, and why you're wrong. You start asking questions that put little chinks in the armor.
Right.
And let them figure it out.
Yes, they need to come to the conclusion on their own. You can't force that conclusion on them.
Sort of a Socratic method kind of approach, which yes. I think that's kind of the right approach in general for anyone.
But particularly if the person you're trying to reach is Mormon, or was at one point, because they are taught day one. Anything that contradicts or goes against the claims of the church is anti-Mormon. And if they hear that phrase, their brains turn off.
Right.
You are wrong. La 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 la. I'm not going to listen to you. You are completely shut out. So, just tying into what Kristen said, it is very important to be subtle, be careful, and appeal to reason. Reason. There'll be a lot of emotion. Expect that, but appeal to their reason.
You don't want to scare them, because that turtle's going to pull back in its shell, and you're never going to get it out. there's this thing where anything that speaks bad of the church, regardless if it's true or not, is anti-Mormon, and anything that's anti-Mormon should be discarded immediately.
Right.
Which is it's kind of frustrating because you can actually point at the facts, what's going on, and they could say, "Nope, not listening." And
Right. Church says 2 + 2 is 5. That's what it is.
yes, that is actually what happens. Historical accounts and documents and testimonies of people from the past that say counter to what actually they believe is discounted. There's a funny thing going on where the church is trying to clear its own nasty history by posting articles on their official website about like the polygamy, the polyandry, the
Blacks in
visions
the
that
priesthood.
blacks in the priesthood, all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to clarify what actually happened, and they're actually posting historical facts, which is great. But what
That's
we're
what we've
starting
been
to
saying all
see
along.
is that, what we're starting to see is that Mormons are pointing at the official LDS website and saying that's anti-Mormon, which is kind of strange.
What? Wow.
But also there was an instance recently of a Sunday school teacher that pulled from the church's own essays and was disciplined for it because that was anti-Mormon.
Wow.
Mormons can't make their minds up. You know,
So-
it's either it's right or it's wrong, and if you're on the wrong side,
So what I'm hearing basically is just, listen, be delicate, ask questions, don't be super strident, and just kind of be delicate.
and one more thing. Mormons are they're not only are they cloistered, but they are taught to be cloistered. At the worst, if you are indelicate, you could actually have your relationship severed with them.
Gotcha.
They will cut you out if they see you as an emissary of Satan or, a tempter or unholy. And if they do think of you like that, I don't think they're at a point that you could even try to reach them. But just walk on eggshells for a little bit.
And some Mormons have a lot to lose if they abandon their faith. Not only do they lose their sense of reality, they also lose their community. And if they are a BYU graduate from the is it a university or college? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
They actually get discredited. All the credits that they earned is just immediately wiped if they say I no longer believe.
Wow. So if you have a degree from BYU and you leave the church, they revoke that?
Yes.
Wow. I didn't know that.
No, actually, again, from looking at ex-Mormon forums, it's more, if you're still an undergraduate, they can keep you from graduating. Thousands of dollars you spend.
Wow.
Oh, guess what? You're not in good ecclesiastical standing, which you need to graduate or to college there. If you lose that, then yes, your thousands of dollars are gone. So they say transfer or just shut up, blend in, and graduate. At that point,
And I get the feeling that my sister, who is a diehard believer, I think there's some serious cracks in her armor, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But she is not at liberty to talk about it or say anything or speak with anyone in a safe manner about it because she might lose that ecclesiastical recommendation, and she lose everything she's ever worked for in college.
Yep, it's gone down the drain.
Yeah, so I think, and obviously there are unique situations with this, but I think I think these things are useful really kind of universally in that you want to respect that person and where they're at, and if you're if you're at all interested in helping that person to respect where they're at and meet them where they're at, and to not discount and to not be mean or disrespectful or anything like that. And again, obviously this discussion could go for days, but so I know I've done a lot of the talking in this, so real quick, Jonathan, let's hear some parting thoughts from you.
I can kind of sympathize with you guys having, lived in Utah. I dated a lot of ex-Mormon guys and guys that were still trying to be Mormon. And, unfortunately, they were really you just kind of have to by default living there, and a lot of them were really screwed up. A lot of them had a lot of issues. I actually dated a guy who was still attending BYU, and eventually he freaked out on me and decided that it was bad and evil what he was doing, and I guess went back to the straight life. So I can definitely understand how hard it is on people, and I got to say big props to you guys for being able to reason your way out of it.
Daniel, parting thoughts?
Well, I knew just about nothing about Mormonism until this talk. So it's really interesting. I think
it's a hell of an introduction.
Deep end. I think from the outside it's easy to look at Mormonism as a cult, and I think that's how probably most folks look at it who don't know much about it. And I think I'm realizing through this talk that when you're able to just say, oh, it's just it's a weird cult, that can kind of hurt your ability to empathize with someone who's trying to come out of it. And so you guys gave us a lot of really, really good information about just how deep it goes and how just completely encompasses their entire world. And so I think that's really useful information. And as atheists, we would like to see the subversion of religion, but I think it's also important to realize that we can't force that on people. We have to, if we're going to help someone come to that decision or be, a part of their support network as they're coming out of a religion like Mormonism, I think it's good to approach it with a lot of compassion. And you guys helped kind of pave that road for folks to begin when dealing with someone who's coming out of that. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I definitely want to echo those sentiments. The whole idea of this show is to take people from across the queer and trans spectrum and give them a platform to tell their stories. It's not just about me or just about Daniel or just about Jonathan. It's about us as a community and our stories and the things that we go through. And I think, even before going back and listening to this episode, I can already tell you that it's probably one of my favorites that we've done, because I think this is such the embodiment of what we're trying to do with this show. I've learned a lot factually about Mormonism and all of that sort of stuff, but I also just want to mention how much I value the fact that you both were so forthcoming and so open about your experiences growing up and coming out of the church and all of that sort of stuff. So I really want to express to both of you how much I appreciate you coming on and giving your time and sharing your story so openly, because that's something that I value in a person very much, is your willingness to be open and doing it on a podcast. It's not like we have thousands upon thousands of listeners, but we do have an audience, and really excited to let you guys tell your stories. So you're both raising your hand. So parting thoughts.
I just wanted to mention one thing that Kristen dropped in the text chat.
Yeah,
and that is, if you are Mormon, you are questioning, or you just want to know a little more about what the historical issues that cause so many people so much cataclysmic faith shock, is exactly what it was. You can go over to cesletter.com, and it's a very, very comprehensive document comprised or written by Jeremy Reynolds. He researched all the issues. He actually sources primary LDS documents in describing these issues, and this includes excerpts from the Journal of Discourses, which was early Mormon leader teachings. Mm-hmm. This includes stuff from LDS.org, the church's official website. He illustrates the main contradictions in the faith, and as far as an introductory primer, as well as a portal out of the faith, or just a way to explore and see, is this actually so?
Right.
That'd be a great place to start.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Kristen, parting thoughts from you, love?
The church right now is on the defensive, and their walls are up, their shields are up, because with the advent of the internet, it's causing a lot of damage to the church. Things that are historically buried in books in a cellar somewhere are now online and freely available to everyone, and everyone can see what the church has done in the past. And so it's causing a lot of problems for the church.
The internet is to the Mormon church what the printing press was to the Catholic Church.
That is a great
Interesting analogy.
Yeah. Well, friends, that is going to do it for another episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. I want to thank again Kristen and Seth so much for being on the show, for being so open and honest about their experiences. I want to thank my lovely co-hosts Jonathan and Daniel.
My pleasure.
Yay.
That was so enthusiastic. I love it. You can reach us online at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCali.
I, Daniel, am on Twitter at Daniel Wolfsong.
And I, Jonathan, am on Twitter at NerdCub. That's with a K.
And you can find the show on Twitter at The Gaytheist. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, and knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.